Hey everyone, welcome to the Netsuite Podcast. I'm your host, Kendall Fisher, and I'm teaming up once again with our business and finance editor, Megan O'Brien, who's helping me co-host another Office of the CFO episode. Hi, Megan.
Hi, Kendall. Thank you so much for having me again. It's good that you're not sick of me yet.
No, not sick of you quite yet, Megan. In fact, I quite enjoy these opportunities that we have together. In fact, we've dedicated an entire mini series to the Office of the CFO because the role has really evolved so drastically. I know you have written a lot about that, right?
Yeah, extensively. The days of the CFO's primary responsibility being internal controls and compliance and kind of being that back office role, that's long gone.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, financial discipline, it's still critical. But today's CFOs have a lot more responsibility than their predecessors did. They're playing really key roles in developing strategy, fostering innovation, and driving growth.
Well, and a lot of high expectations around the CFO means there's a lot to talk about, which is great for us on this sort of mini series we're doing together. How to navigate those expectations, the skills needed to be successful as a CFO today, the tools to help make sense of endless amounts of data, and so much more.
Yes, and we kicked off the series with Glenn Hopper, the CFO standline. And if you haven't listened yet, it's available to you now. And today we're chatting with Bolanle Williams-Olley, the author of Build Boldly and the CFO of Mancini Duffy, an architecture design firm.
Bola is going to take us on her non-traditional journey to becoming a CFO, how she learned the skills necessary to be successful at each step of her career, the metrics she tracked as a controller for Mancini Duffy, and how that ties seamlessly to her role today.
She'll also dive into the way her focus shifted among the pandemic and how technology has helped her navigate these tumultuous times throughout her career. And she'll conclude with what it means to be a bold finance leader and a really bold leader overall.
I am so excited. She is an awesome interview. So enough about us, Megan. Let's get to it.
You're listening to the Netsuite Podcast, where we discuss what's happening within NetSuite, why we're doing it, and where we're heading in the future. We'll dive into the details about the software and the people at NetSuite who are behind all the moving parts. We'll also feature customer growth stories, discussing the ups and downs of running a company and how one integrated system can help your business continue to scale.
Hi, Bola. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here today.
And where are you joining us from?
I'm joining you from New York City.
Oh, amazing. New York's obviously, I mean, like everybody says this, one of my favorite places in the world for sure. I always thought I'd end up in New York one day, but never made it there. I ended up staying in LA my whole life. Maybe the future, the future is bright.
You have
Maybe
to come
day.
visit.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
You have to come visit.
Now, as Megan knows, I am a big, admittedly nerdy fan of breaking the ice. So Bola, to break the ice here, can you give us one fun fact about you?
Sure. So fun fact about me is that I love to plan theme parties. So I actually have my daughter's birthday coming up tomorrow. We're doing an ultimate Valentine's night.
Oh my gosh.
For her and her little girlfriends.
How fun. Okay. So that might be my fun fact. I love throwing themed parties. It's so funny. My birthday is actually in March, and it is the day that basically the world shut down in 2020, March 12th.
Wow.
So I turned 30 on March 12th in 2020, actually. So I haven't gotten together with any friends over the past 2 years, for safety reasons. And this year I'm finally getting together with people, and the first thing everybody asked was, so what's the theme? Are we wearing wigs? Are we going disco? Are we doing, one time I did a Britney Spears themed birthday where everybody was
perfect.
Yeah. So I love that we have that in common. I love that.
Yes, yeah. Theme parties are great.
It's the best. It's the best. It gives somebody, people get to look forward to it. And I always think it just, it adds a little fun touch to any party. So I love that we have that in common. And while I could sit here and talk about themed parties all day, I know that I want to get into your story, Bola, and your career journey. So let's dive in. As Megan and I noted in the opening of this episode, you're not only a CFO, but you're also an author. You recently published your book, Build Boldly, and we don't often see CFOs penning books. So you'll have to tell us, what was your inspiration?
My inspiration when it came to writing Build Boldly was simply to share my playbook with others, to inspire them to write their own playbooks. Individuals, other firm leaders, really thinking about how are you intentionally charting your path, and how are you intentionally leading others to chart their own path. And so I thought about my entire career journey over the last 15 years. I moved to the States in 2002. And here I am, a Nigerian immigrant, moved here at 15 years later. I have been able to become CFO and co-owner of a really rich architecture firm. What's there not to share, right? And my path here was not traditional at all. And so just thinking about themes that had come up over my career, moments where I was really bold was when I saw exponential growth. And I then decided to put it into a book, essentially creating a playbook for others to learn from and be inspired by.
Well, that's so interesting. And it was one of the most, I thought one of my favorite parts of the book was kind of your journey and your non-traditional path. Can you tell us a little bit more about your move from Nigeria to the US and what you studied in college and why?
Of course. So when I moved to the US, I laughed because I moved here wanting to study computer engineering. My first semester in school, I took physics and it was absolutely horrible. So I picked up the phone and called my mother to let her know I was going to be switching majors. And so the whole point of me coming to the States, of course, was to go to college. My mom, was fortunate to have her own first and second degree here. She went to Rutgers in New Jersey. And so it was very important for her that I also got the best of, opportunities when it came to my education. And so anyways, I picked up the phone, gave her a call and said, listen, I will be changing my major to mathematics. I always had an affinity for math. With a minor in comp sci, and my college, Hunter College, which was based in New York, had an applied math program, which would allow you use your math degree, in corporate world if you chose to. I didn't know where I was going to end up, but it seemed like a really good program, and she was very supportive of that, right? So here I am. I changed my degree and essentially have stayed. Stayed here in the States.
So you're not the only one who struggled with physics. I remember talking to my counselor and she's like, you're not thriving in physics, are you? And I'm like, no.
Oh, no.
So that was a path change for me too. Physics tends to.
Yeah, but it's so funny because for me, even though I ran away from physics, I ended up doing like my master's thesis in fluid dynamics, which is like physics still. Yeah. So I just approached it more from a mathematical standpoint.
There you go.
You came back.
Yeah.
So how did you land your first job out of college? And how do you think that first job set you up for your career path afterwards?
This is like one of my own favorite stories / memories that I have, right? So in college, again, I picked math. I started doing my, making it through the years, but with no internship, right? So in New York City, a lot of the friends that I had either went to Baruch, which is a sister school of Hunter, and a lot of them were studying accounting, finance. Now, I didn't want to do accounting or finance because my mother studied that, right? I was the one child who said I didn't want to go into the path of my mom. But then you fast forward 5 years and you're about, you're a senior, almost done with your program. And now I needed to find work. The way I found my first job was looking, this is pre-Indeed, pre-LinkedIn. It was literally looking into the New York Times classifieds and I saw a position for a junior project accountant in an architecture firm. Why did it catch my interest? Because I had taken technical drawing in high school for like a term. And I said, well, I think it'll be interesting to, work in an architecture firm. I have this connection to the industry, vague connection to the industry. So I applied. That interview essentially is what was my introduction into the architecture and interior design industry, and literally set me on this path that I've been. And so the key thing about, I think, what sealed the deal for me with that interview was that I went into that interview being myself. I wasn't going to be afraid to speak up about my math degree and this like really hard topic I was doing in my thesis. I made sure that I wasn't trying to be somebody else. You understand what I mean? And I mean that because, again, I had all these friends who were getting like really high profile jobs at the big fours. And I was like, you know what? I just need to be me. This interview needs to seal the deal for me. I need to make sure I represent myself well. Well, it turns out that the interviewer studied mathematics in school. And so we connected on that.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah, it was really perfect. And within days, I think I was maybe like 2 weeks to graduation. I was able to get, my first job, which was where a lot of my foundation came from. And I'm really grateful for the time I spent there.
Wow. So first of all, what I'm impressed by is that this isn't you, in your 40s learning like, oh, I need to be more authentic to myself. You're 20 years old or so taking this interview.
I'm like 21. I literally had nothing to lose. I was like, I have to go in here and be myself.
Was there anything that made you realize that? Like, or was that just ingrained in you? I mean, because that could be ingrained in you from your mom or school or friends.
No, not at all. You know what? So I always, I think back and I remember, applying for various jobs at the same, financial services slash all the different places I applied to. And I remember going into those interviews being really scared, being really timid. And so, when you have 1, 2, 3 interviews that you feel like, didn't go how you thought they should have, or you weren't representing yourself well, I literally had a choice to make. It was like an intentional choice to make at that moment. Like, what are you going to do? How are you going to show up? And I decided to take that leap on myself. I decided to bet on myself. I decided to be bold about, how I approached that interview. I just remember how I felt. I felt really good. And I made a decision saying, no matter what the outcome, right? No matter what the outcome is, after I walk out this door, as long as I went into that interview and I felt like I was true to myself, that was a win for me. Whether or not I needed to like pack my bags and move back to Nigeria again, because I was an international student, I knew that I wanted to make sure that interview, I gave it my best shot.
That's great. And again, just super impressive at that age to recognize that. And a huge takeaway for anybody listening right now that we all have to go through the interview process, whether you're interviewing to be a small, sales manager or in the C-suite, you still have to go through an interview. So I think that's super important. Now, what were some of the big milestones or other moments in your career that really stand out to you, leading up to where you are today?
Yeah. So going back to that first job, a big milestone for me. So I'll date it now. So I got that job in 2007. And as you both know, a year after, we hit the financial crisis of 2008. Now, unfortunately, because of just how the effect on the industry and of course, companies, people started getting layoffs. And so there was now an opportunity for me to step into a bigger role. Unfortunately, some of my colleagues got laid off. And so I saw it as an opportunity to, one, walk into the CFO's office to talk to him, to say, hey, listen, I think I'm up to the task. I can do the job. I can learn. Please invest in me, take a chance on me. And I got to work. So that, again, you see, maybe because I had taken that bold step in the interview and had started forming like good relationships, it I just saw it as an opportunity. And I think that's a takeaway, even in situations like this that we're currently facing with COVID, right? You have an opportunity to either see it as, are you going to just shell down in, or are you going to look for ways in which you can provide value to your company? And so that moment was huge for me because I got a lot of experience, right? I was able to like dive really deeply into projects. I was able to fully understand how to support the firm financially. We were able to even do like a technology, our accounting software, we were able to upgrade it during that time. And so that time there, I say, was incredible. And the reason why I say it was a milestone is because, again, remember, I studied math in school, right? So I needed to pretty much get on-ground experience about the industry. So yeah, that time was really great for me, after spending 5 years there, because I was getting my training in the field, as I would like to call it. I wanted to be able to see how accounting was done, or finance and accounting was done in another organization, in another architectural firm. I was like, maybe the HLWA, which is the company I worked at, is very good, but I want to be able to see it if I'm going to make a home for myself within this industry, if I want to grow in here. And so I shifted, to a larger firm called Skidmore Owings Merrill. And I'm grateful for my time there because, again, big moments there too. I was able to work on work in our China region. I was able to work on really huge New York City projects. I was the kind of accountant who didn't want to just be in the back issuing invoices, but like asking our project managers about their projects, asking them to bring me to the site, so that I can, even if it's just to connect with my counterpart on that site. Right. So those moments, I think, really set me up for, the role that I took in Mancini without even knowing, that this opportunity will come my way.
Well, and we're going to talk about, I think that's super, you were a project accountant, right? Yes. Previous to Mancini.
Yes. So, in terms of, I guess, roles, right? So at the first job, I was junior project, then I took a step up to project. And then at SOM, I was a senior project accountant there.
So I before we move on, we're going to get into Mancini and your role here today. But I want to ask a bit more about that. What is the importance of having a cohesive team and connections? Like you said, making the connections, not just being in the background as a project accountant, but making the connection from the accounting side to the project manager, even the client's counterparts. How does that really drive success and efficiency for, a service-centric business like you were in?
Yeah. So for me, I think it is integral. It is so important that project accountants think about themselves as a critical member of the project team. Likewise, the project managers thinking about, their accounting / finance support as a member of their team. Reason being, there's power in numbers. In my industry, for example, when you have a project that you won, one of the very first things that you do is you plan for the people who work on the project, who are going to work on the project. A project accountant, during the course of the month, and I'm giving an example because I like to give examples.
Yes, but we love examples here.
Yeah. So a project accountant, has the view of being able to now see, as your month is progressing, who is working on your project. And then, if you have certain rhythms in place, financial rhythms in place where, maybe your project accountant is reviewing the timesheets or the time posted to the project, they're able to raise flags early, right? So for me, that's being able to think outside of the box, think outside of just, a monthly billing cycle, think like what can I do to ensure that the project manager is successful, that their projects are successful from a financial standpoint, has the impact of even saving project managers from issues that can come up on the project site. Right. And what I mean by that is, for example, a project I'm remembering, I think we were looking at the numbers, seeing how much time was being spent on a particular phase, and it didn't make sense. And so then that prompted the project manager to go back and speak to her team. So for me, that cohesiveness, I'm a huge champion of making sure that project accountants, project managers are constantly communicating, constantly talking, knowing that, that their work that they're doing is there to support them. We might not know what the drawings mean, but we can tell you from the numbers allow us ask the right questions. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Well, and with so many moving parts, that's so, in any project, I can't even imagine in an architectural firm, but in any project, the amount of moving parts, that's critical for everybody to, be communicating, to have the same information in order to, like you said, work more efficiently. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I just wanted to address one more thing. And that's the external piece of it, right? What is the importance of the project? Yeah. On the client side. At the end of the day, you're issuing these invoices. I say people pay people, right? You issue an invoice, and the goal, of course, is to make sure that you're able to collect on that invoice. Get to know who your client, who the counterpart is. The project managers can tell you, yes, accounting has approved it, but until that invoice makes its way, you guys know, until that invoice makes its way down, and somebody on the other side has, cut that payment. We haven't been, you wouldn't have been able to collect on it. And I say there needs to be, relationship building, getting to know them, getting to know who makes the decisions on that side is critical. And it showed for me during COVID, right? At the very, like you said, March, because I had been developing these relationships with, certain key contacts on our client side, I was able to call them just to understand what the status was on the projects itself, what's the status on our payments, things like that. But if I had never taken that time out to develop those relationships, if I had called, they'd be like, okay, who's this?
Absolutely.
You get what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that was so critical for, like you said, in project management with suppliers, with, real estate, like the people who, you're renting from or whatever. That's huge.
And we've kind of touched on it a little. Mancini Duffy, that's an architecture firm, but I'd love to hear more about what the company does, what you do for your clients.
Yeah. So Mancini, we like to call ourselves a technology-first architecture firm. So we specialize in architecture, of course, planning and interior design. And the reason why we call ourselves a technology-first firm is because over the last, I would say now, 4 years, we've been developing technology to help improve how we deliver projects to our clients. So our clients run from, financial services, retail, restaurants, education, commercial projects. We have a huge project that we're working on in Times Square. But we started thinking about ways in which we can use technology to help improve the decision-making and design process for our folks who work in here, and also just to challenge, our peers in the profession. And so we have something called a 360 design process, which we've developed, where we pull our clients in from very early on in planning. And so what I mean by that is, usually a client might, you might have a meeting, and then the client says, these are the ideas that I have. And usually what will happen is the architect will go back, they might come up with 3 different options. You come back and then you show the client. And that whole process can take 3 weeks. But through our 360 design process, we've essentially shrunk down that process to 3 hours, where we are throwing our clients into their space in VR. And they are able to, sketch or share with us their ideas. And we are sketching in VR. But that VR model is connected to the architect's software, right? So what would usually take 3 weeks, we've been able to do it in 3 hours. And then it's just helped make decisions faster. It's also a value add, because a lot of the things that you might not catch when you're actually, in construction, we can catch them very early. And so it's been, for me, it's incredible to be able to be a part of this, see how I I can walk into that design lab now, and I'm telling you, because of how innovative they are and the research that they're doing, I can walk into there and what I saw 2 weeks ago has been improved upon. And that is coming from feedback from our clients, or the clients ask a question. We're able to then go and implement and change it. But it's been amazing. Mancini used to be solely, a couple years back, used to just solely focus on financial services, but we've been able to diversify, the clients that we serve.
Well, how amazing is that? Because, I've seen architectural sketches before, and it's something that I look at and I can see the detail and precision, but sometimes I can't visualize it. I can't see exactly what it is.
Right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, bringing that to such a level is amazing.
Yeah. It's been really helpful for our clients. It's been helpful for our designers. It's just overall improved how we work. So I'm looking forward to seeing what else comes up, in that lab.
Yeah, exactly. And it's got to be a huge value add to your clients.
Yeah.
Now, it kind of jumping into the accounting and finance side of things, are there challenges that you face that are very specific to a business like this?
Yes, yes. And, my challenge that I think we see in projects, like architectural projects, even from the accounting side, is something that we call the triple constraint. And that is, you want to deliver a project on time, within scope, and on budget, right? And that's how you can say that your project is successful. That challenge, of course, is, you can start a project and there are so many factors that come up that are just beyond our control. When those factors come up, they can change your scope, right? They can change the budget. A perfect example right now is, supply chain issues that are happening right now, right? So things that maybe you were meant to deliver interior of furniture as fixtures to a project within a certain time frame, because of all the backlog that's happening, you're not able to, and that affects your timeline. That affects how we can either offboard those architects or designers to start doing other projects. So that's one challenge that any architectural firm will tell you across board. It's something that we're always trying to balance, while making sure that, we're meeting our clients' expectations. The client is satisfied with the work that we do. From an accounting standpoint, specifically, of course, is always, collecting on your invoices, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But once you issue out that invoice, making sure that your client pays and pays you on time is something that I'm always working to improve.
I mean, we hear that across the board.
Yes.
So, while that is specific to your business, I think it's specific to all project services-based businesses.
Of course.
We hear it a lot.
Does your business have trouble managing inventory, projects, or even getting paid on time? Don't let spreadsheets and QuickBooks hold you back. If you want to get your business to a better place, take action now and make the move to NetSuite. Stop paying for multiple systems that don't give you the information you need when you need it. Ditch the spreadsheets and all the old software you've outgrown. Now is the time to upgrade to NetSuite by Oracle, the world's #1 cloud business system. NetSuite gives you visibility and control over your financials, HR, inventory, e-commerce, and more. Everything you need, all in one place, instantaneously. Whether you're doing $1 million or hundreds of millions in revenue, save time and money with NetSuite.
Join the over 24,000 companies using NetSuite right now. Let NetSuite show you how they'll benefit your business with a free product tour at netsuite.com/business. Schedule your free product tour right now at netsuite.com/business. netsuite.com/business.
Okay, so I'm going to take it back to your start at Mancini Duffy in 2017. You actually took on the role of a controller without a super clear idea of what that would entail or prior experience. You had worked as an accountant previously. So first, how did you land that role without that prior experience?
So I just love how my path has unfolded.
Yeah.
the way I landed this role at Mancini was because someone remembered me and mentioned my name to our Mancini's president, who I had worked with 10 years prior at that very first job at HLW, where I was a junior project accountant. That's how my name came up.
Wow.
Right. And so based on, I guess, my work ethic and maybe possible trajectory, right? Of course, you can go on LinkedIn and see how the person has moved on, where the person is at now. I got a phone call. I remember I just had my second child.
Wow.
And I got a phone call. So I got a phone call saying, hey, would you love to come run a finance team? And understand my situation. So my daughter was not 2 yet. I just gave birth. Right.
Oh, 2 under 2.
I had 202 then. So stability, right? You would think that I wouldn't want to rock the boat too much and then go jump into this role that, like I mentioned, I'd never done before. However, there was a curious side to me that said I should take the phone call. Mm-hmm. I take the phone call, and it is Christian Giordano on the other end who is telling me about, all the changes that Christian Giordano is the president of Mancini. He's telling me about all the changes that he's looking to make, his vision for where he wants the firm to go. And he thought that we should meet up for lunch. Mm-hmm. So the interview ended up being a really fancy lunch where essentially, we talked about, I guess maybe that bug that's in me of like laying my cards out on the table. I went into that interview with like everything that I thought would set me up for, failure, right? All the fears that I had about taking this role. I went into that interview and I said, listen, if I'm going to assume this role, we need to make sure that we set me up for success, right? And so what I mean by that is, I had experience. And I think that was the uniqueness about me. I had experience of how I approached understanding our projects. I had 10 years of experience of working in the industry, working on all sorts of scale and types of projects that I had touched. I had seen region, location. So I went in there and I said, hey, listen, I can do project accounting in my sleep, right? I can do this. But if you want me to become a controller, then I'm now going to be exposed to firm-wide information where, whereas in the organizations I'd worked in the past, I didn't necessarily have purview to that. Right. He said, well, don't worry about that. I will make sure that we get you a financial consultant who can, guide you and be there sort of as a mentor for you while you are settling in and, and figuring things out. I said, okay, so we've addressed my knowledge gap. The next thing I mentioned, actually that came last, I think, because I said work we can do. Let me make sure that there's value alignment with myself and the firm. So one of the very first questions I asked was around flexibility for family, right? I mentioned I had 2 kids under 2, so I needed some flexibility with, coming to work, showing up. And I wanted to work at an organization that understood this current season I was at in my life. And he was like, we're a very family oriented firm. So that checked off a point. I'm multifaceted. And what I mean by that is I'm always thinking about ways in which to solve issues for people. So I had a nonprofit I was working on. I mentioned my nonprofit work. I do projects in Nigeria in education and I think at that point in time, I was still in school. And I don't think a potential employer would have understood why this accountant went back to get a second master's in education and social policy. So all these questions I had, we addressed it during that interview. And I walked out of there feeling like, I think I can do this. He essentially hired for character. I say this, you hire for character, skill can be learned.
I love
that. Skill can be learned, right? Especially if your potential hire is already an A+ player. They have a track record that you've been able to look at. For me, there were also people who could vouch to, I guess, my work ethic. So he took a chance on me. This is like when you apply for your first job, right? And then the first job says, oh, you need to have 10 years experience. Well, like, how am I going to get the experience if you don't give me a shot?
Right. It's chicken or the egg thing. Yeah.
Yes. If you don't give me a shot. So, and an important thing he did say to me was like, you try it. And if after 6 months, a year, you don't like it, that's fine, right? That removes that fear of failure that a lot of us feel when it comes to, going to the next level, doing things that scare you. It's, right. Oh, I'm afraid that I might fail. Yes, of course, there are high stakes, being a controller and failing at that level, controller, CFO, and failing at that level. However, like I mentioned, I was an A player. I was ready to go. I was ready to take the opportunity. So that's how I landed it. He took a chance on me and I got a double promotion.
I know. And we're going to get into you becoming the CFO of Mancini here in a second, but so you mentioned you had experience really on a kind of project by project basis, but not really a firm wide, right? Insight into the firm wide information. So I want to know, as the controller, what were some of the KPIs and metrics you were tracking? Like, what was the difference between a project level and a firm level, and how did you become successful in that role?
Yeah. So once I joined Mancini and started the work, right, I began to see all aspects, not just financial, but like HR, IT, legal. Mancini, depending on, it truly depends on your firm size. So we're a mid-sized firm. And so sometimes the controller role would be sort of hybrid, right? Where you're touching on all these different things. So of course, once I hit the ground running, one of the metrics that I wanted to make sure that I understood fully was just how the system worked, how their billing cycle was working. How are we getting invoices out to the clients on time? How are we following up on these invoices? Do the project managers understand how the monthly accounting process works? How we need to close out our month so that we can then provide them with valuable information that affects the decisions that they're making on their projects. So from a financial perspective, those were I mentioned three things. Those are the three things I worked on first, right? Reducing our collections period, getting the PMs, reducing how long it takes us to close out the month, and then also educating the PMs when it came to understanding project profitability. Those three things I truly worked on first, while then familiarizing myself with the HR piece of it. We had a PEO, so that's like an external organization that was handling our HR. So just liaisoning with them, developing those relationships with them, making sure that employee engagement also was strong here. That was very important to me. So those are some of the things that I started looking at. I was able to improve greatly those metrics.
Well, I love how this ties back to what you said earlier. What one of either your first or your second role, where you really focused on breaking down those barriers between teams, between the accounting and finance side and the project managers and even the clients. I think that all plays into what you were able to change at Mancini too.
Yes. Yeah. So for me, it was, okay, what can I do immediately? What can I change short term? And as ambitious, sometimes maybe I would even call myself overly ambitious. When you take a second, a pause just to reflect back, then what can you really change long term? Right. So it's almost like, when I took the job, because I didn't have the experience, you could even say that I had something to prove, right? Prove to the people, even though they had no questions at all. When I say prove to people, prove to the other firm leaders, they had no questions at all. They fully trusted me. But there were vendor partners who were like, wait, what? She's not an accountant by training. She doesn't have a CPA. Is she just like operational? So there were, you could say that I had something to prove. However, remove all of that and just be willing to learn and learn fast. And of course, whatever you can change, maybe do that. My experience at the firm that I worked at prior, SOM, gave me the rigor that I could apply to Mancini, right? So maybe areas where Mancini was a little lax, I was able to take that rigor from working at a really large company and bring that here. And we saw huge improvements.
And that's it's kind of the thing where I was interviewing a consultant and he was explaining this complex business topic. And I joked something along the lines of, oh, I need to get my MBA. And he said, I never learned this in school. It was on the job,
Yes.
It's the experience that really helps be successful. And kind of speaking of that success, what skills do you think controllers need today to be successful?
So I think controllers need to really think about themselves more than just being, the gatekeepers of accounting or the gatekeepers of numbers. There's opportunity for you, one, to be, forward thinking, being strategic. If you're a controller that works, in a firm where there is a CFO, right? Like, how are you really providing value to your CFO so that the things that the CFO needs to be thinking about that should be top of mind, you're providing that to them. Then another thing I think controllers also need to do is develop their people, right? Develop the accountants who are working under you, develop your team, listen to them. They are the ones probably even fully ingrained into the project. So make sure that you're developing them so that they can be successful in their role, which will then in turn make the controller successful. So those are, when I think about my experience, I really needed to rely on the team members. I had two people who had worked at this organization for 25 years when I came here. Who's going to know more about the organization than both of them? Right. So I needed to make sure that I made space for them to feel like their opinions mattered, like they could bring suggestions to me, right? And so that's, developing your team, strengthening your staff, strengthening the relationship with your staff, because they have a lot of knowledge. So it's not just working in a silo, just, focused on, month-end reporting or financial reporting, but like just beginning to get out of that box so that you can really position yourself as a very important member of the organization who's really keyed into the success of the firm.
Well, you kind of segued perfectly into this. How did you make the transition to CFO in 2018? And is there any advice you can share from that?
Yes. So for me, I personally feel like from day one, even though my title was controller, I always worked as a CFO, right? I was always looking into the future. I was always being a strategic a strategic partner to the CEO. I was providing them information all the time, financial information, and they weren't used to receiving it, as often as I was providing it to them. And I think a key thing that I did was breaking it down in language that they understand, right? You're working with architects and designers. They are visual people, right? And so one of the ways, I thought about presenting information to them was visually, right? Like, how can you present information to them in ways in which that they will understand? And so that's because I sort of was always working in that, working as a CFO, my transition was essentially Christian, our president, saying, okay, enough of this. You've had this controller title for a year. We need to give you your right title, right? You've spent the last year sort of learning about the organization. You've now implemented a bunch of changes you want to do. You've corrected our external partnerships that we have with our different vendors. You're really guiding and giving us like strategic financial initiatives that we need to implement into the organization. Okay, we need to change your title. And so that's essentially how that happened.
Well, so I'm curious, how would you describe, obviously you were saying you came in, you really were working with the mentality of the CFO from the beginning, but what are some of the key differentiators between a CFO and a controller? I guess to answer that, what are the differences in, for example, KPIs and metrics that you were tracking as a CFO versus a controller?
Yeah. So when I think about this, right, in my organization or mid-sized company, sometimes, there might not be clear differences. However, when I was just thinking about some of the tasks, for example, that I shed off moving up, right, when I started building out my own team to make sure that there's really time for me to step fully into that CFO role, I thought about, what was my focus on? When I first came, yes, I was focused on the finance department, making sure that everything that they're doing worked well. We were providing information to our project managers on time, but my focus really needed to be on the entire company. So that's one difference, I think, between a controller and a CFO, whereas a controller sometimes doesn't have an opportunity to focus on the entire company. A CFO primarily needs to be making sure that everything, all the different departments, everything is working as needed. So a clear difference is on focus. Another thing that I thought about was, the time frame, right? When I was a controller, it was very short-term thinking, right? What am I doing now? How are my reports affecting the decisions we're making short-term? But as a CFO, I needed to be able to see past a year. I needed to be able to be keyed into what our long-term goals are for Mancini and how we make that possible, right? Mm-hmm. So time frame in terms of like what the controller is focusing on and what the CFO is focusing on, there's a clear difference in that. And I think one of the other, last areas that I'll bring up as a point is, what is the CFO's mission, vision? It's really strategy, right? How are we setting the tone for the financial actions that the firm has to take? A controller's role, their mission, again, which kind of allows the CFO focus on their strategies is from a compliance perspective, right? How are they making sure that everything that we're producing, reports we're producing, or things that are happening on the projects we're working on is compliant with all that we need to do from an accounting perspective? So those three different areas that I've mentioned, I think are some clear differences when I think about how I'm functioning now as a CFO and how I was functioning as a controller that I wanted to share. One of the things that I did, making that move was making sure that I hired help, right? If I was going to move fully into CFO and not use some of my brain cells to think about, like the day-to-day items, I needed to make sure that I had the right team built, right? So like some of the tasks that I was doing, month-end closing or payroll that I don't enjoy, I needed to make sure that there was somebody else here that was strong, taking care of those things. So I didn't have to second guess or having to double check their work. And so I made sure to do that. And so then that allowed me fully propel into the CFO role.
And I mean, so you were in the CFO role for about 2 years when COVID hit. So I'm curious too, how did your priorities change or evolve amid the pandemic in this role?
Oh, yes. Man,
you hit on it earlier, but
yes, I will say for a lot of us, right? Who has led a company through a pandemic? There were, you went from in March, having to really think very, very quickly about what levers you needed to pull or, pause, pull so that the company could just make it through the next couple of months because we didn't know what was going to happen. And so what I mean by that is in terms of the client relationships, right? Looking at our portfolio, which one of our clients immediately or which one of our projects immediately went on hold, right? You think about restaurants, right? I mentioned that we were doing a lot of restaurants, a lot of work in hospitality. So you begin to start looking at which one of what in your portfolio is affected and how can you make decisions quickly to make sure that even if you're having that revenue gap, that you're also reducing your expenses, right? So these were some of the things that I had to think about really quickly. I attribute some of that also to my math degree, right? If you think
Right.
about it, at the end of the day, it boils down to math. It's either your revenue, if your revenue is going down, you want to stay in business, you need to look at your expenses. So my team and I went through the expenses, looked at who we can either call in for favors on payment extensions, things like that. And so now, once we started going through the pandemic, and now I see, you're now trying to get out of it. Now we're on the other end of it, where clients are now ready to do work, right? And so you're having to navigate hiring people at once, because either projects that went on hold, they're already back. And then of course, you're also backfilling work that you weren't able to win over the last 2 years, right? There are new projects that have come up now. And so it's this delicate balance, I like to call it, of just making sure that you have a lot of clarity around your numbers. I have a lot of clarity around what I'm reporting to our leadership team, so that we know what decisions need to be made. Right now, like I mentioned, we need to hire people, right? So what is taking the back seat, so that we make sure we have the right talent here.
And I think you kind of have something that struck me when I've read your book is you have this unique perspective, because you were an accountant taking on a lot of responsibility during the 2008 financial crisis, and now you're a CFO during a pandemic. Something that we've seen an increase in importance during these tumultuous times is scenario planning. Have you found that to be true? And if so, what challenges have you faced while trying to plan in unprecedented times?
Yeah, so I have, it is critical. It is very important. And for me, the challenge that we face specific to our industry is, one, just knowing what your clients are going to do, right? If the client doesn't make a decision to move forward in a project, your projections are only as good as the information that's coming from the clients, coming from the project managers. And so being able to put together different plans, right, for our core work, the stuff that we know is going to constantly come in, being able to plan against those fees is important for us to know what can we do based off of that knowledge. Then based off of the knowledge that, certain clients might pick up, for example, with restaurant work. Now we're on the other end, restaurants and aviation. We're on the other end where all of this work is coming in. So how much staff do we need to hire to make sure this work is going to get done? So all the different levers, as I had mentioned, just having a good understanding of what those different levers do for our business, how it affects the decisions that we make, is critical. I think one of the things that happens with scenario planning is that we go through the scenario and we don't document what we did to help us get through it. And so I think documentation is really important, because the fact of the matter is, in business, we might not have a situation as drastic. Actually, we pray we don't have a situation as drastic as COVID, but issues happen all the time. Right. Mm-hmm. Like I mentioned, big projects can go on hold. Well, then what happens to your company when that happens? You need to know at foundation what decisions you need to make. And so I think documentation will really help when it comes to solving issues going forward around the ebbs and flows of running a business.
Well, and I was, going to ask you, when you say documentation, I mean, to me, this is technology. You even said Mancini, technology is at the forefront of Mancini. So how has technology made your job as both the controller and the CFO easier, or you could even say harder, and in what specific ways?
Yeah, so technology, well, outside of the folks on the floor, for me, technology has made my job easier in the sense of being able to push a button to have, an overview of the financial health of our company, being able to see how our projects are doing individually, being able to run, reports based on project managers. it's really helped me rather than spending a lot of time, like, messing around with data. And then, when you mess around with that data, you don't even know if you then go make a mistake in there. For me, technology has helped the day-to-day aspect of just being able to see information really, really clearly. So for me, we do have a system that we use. We have a system that we use in the industry that has helped a lot. In some ways, for our project managers, it's not as intuitive as it can be. I do feel like maybe the next version will be. So when I think about how it has made our jobs harder, it might have made our jobs harder in terms of our project managers going in to be able to plan their projects at ease. So I say to them, think about the user of the technology, right? Don't just create softwares that don't think about all the different folks who will use it. And so for me, like that's one way in which I think has made it harder for us. But overall, it's made my job easier. I'm able to just move through the day with ease.
Now, to wrap it up here, all this really showcases how you've become a bold finance leader. What advice do you have for others on becoming a bolder finance leader?
The one advice I would say, and the word bold, I mean, in my book, it comes from a framework of what I feel like are the themes that have showed up in my leadership, in how I operated as an employee and now how I'm operating as a leader. And so I'll quickly share it. B is be yourself, right? Your employees, the folks who work on your team and the floor, they need to see a leader who's real. And that's how people connect with you. And so if you're not used to being vulnerable, start being vulnerable. It makes the folks who work with you buy into the vision and the dream that you're trying to create for your organization, because they see someone who's real with them, right? Always being opening your mind to new definitions and opportunities. So really challenge the status quo. How have things been run in your organization, and how can you change certain processes, certain systems, so that things run better for you, right? Don't just do things just because that's how it's always been done, but really think about what opportunity can you take to move your team/company where you want it to go. L is lifting others. So think about how you're lifting your employees. Think about how you're lifting people in your groups. How are you providing them with mentorship? How are you providing them with opportunities to develop their careers if they work, if they stay at length with you, right? So think about ways in which you can lift others in your organization. And D is don't wait, do it now. And the idea behind that is, a lot of us are just waiting for the perfect moment, perfect time. But there are ideas that you might have. There's opportunities for you to share them in your organization that can help tie into the overall success of your firm. Don't wait, do it now, right? So that framework is, when I think about how to become a bold finance leader, start with that framework and bet on yourself. Your ideas are valid. Don't be afraid to pivot, right? Bold leaders are not afraid to pivot. You put out an idea and it might not resonate or work as you have planned in your head, but don't be afraid to pivot, right? So you need to be open to being flexible, being open to listening. Bold leaders listen, right? Because you're open to feedback. I truly believe, if you take these things or these tips and then apply it to who you are, you will begin to see changes within yourself as a leader, and the folks who are leading you will see that change too.
Wow. Well, there's no better way than to end on that note, Bola. I could keep talking with you forever. I'm sure Megan feels the same. But thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for this valuable insight. We really appreciate your time, and we just look forward to working with you again in the future.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Wow. I loved that interview, Megan. I loved hearing about how Bola really bet on herself throughout each new step of her career, each interview and each role, even if she didn't have a whole lot of experience. Like she said, skills really can be taught, but character can't. I just thought that was so great.
Right. And her background was so amazing to hear about, and just her journey as she's gone through her different roles and now as a CFO. For me, I mean, I love to hear the framework about being a bold leader, especially with things being so crazy right now. I think it's almost like people are holding back a bit, and it's refreshing to hear a mantra that says go for it. And we actually got to see how that played out in her life.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much to Bola Williams-Olley for joining us on this episode. And if you want to hear more from her and maybe even jump in the hot seat with some questions for her, join our webinar on March 16th at 11 a.m. Pacific. I have left a link in the description of this episode to help you register. And I also want to be sure, of course, Megan, to thank you. I'm already looking forward to our next recording together.
Oh, thanks for having me again. And it's so exciting to join you, and I'm having fun on these recordings.
Well, we'll have fun next time too. I also want to take a second to quickly thank our editing crew over at Lampstand, and as always, all of you for tuning in. If you don't ever want to miss any episodes, then make sure you subscribe to our channel and give us a rating and review if you feel so inclined. Thanks so much, and we'll talk soon. Bye.
You just listened to the Netsuite Podcast. Be sure to tune in every week with more Netsuite developments, stories, and insights into the benefits of one integrated system to help you run your business.